Southark Spotlight is brought to you by Maxwell Hardwood Flooring. Maxwell Hardwood Flooring, located in Monticello, has been producing quality, solid, and engineered hardwood flooring for over 28 years. The company and sister companies, Ouachita Hardwood and Townsend Inc. in Warren, are proud to be providing American-made flooring to distributors and retailers from coast to coast while serving our local communities right here at home. Maxwell Hardwood Flooring, your best start for a great finish.
Dr. Pelkki, thank you for visiting with SalineRiverChronicle.com. We appreciate it very much. You're our first guest in a new program we're going to start showing on a monthly basis and in our region on our website. It's just talking about everything from economics to politics to anything and everything else in between that we think is of interest to the people of our area. So thank you.
I'm glad to be here today.
Could, just for all of our viewers and those that will be watching, can you give us your title and what you do here at UAM?
All right. So in the University of Arkansas at Monticello, College of Forestry, Agricultural and Natural Resources, I am the Clippert Endowed Chair of Forest Economics, Policy and Management. And I am also the Associate Director of the Arkansas Forest Resources Center. So I assist the Dean with research work that we do across all of our faculty and professors.
Okay, what can you give maybe just a quick sample of what kind of research you do or something like that?
All right, so a lot of my research work is really based on forest-based economic development, the impacts, look at timber supply and non-industrial private forest landowner management, working ways to more efficiently grow trees, working in a variety of developing different markets for Arkansas's wood products, and we'll talk about some of those today, ranging from environmental markets for air quality in terms of carbon, water, wildlife biodiversity, and then also things like cross-laminated timber markets, which are coming to Arkansas, and as well as supporting those existing industries which are so important to our state.
Well, absolutely. I think most people are going to know this, but timber is a big part of the economy of Arkansas, and certainly South Arkansas,
yes,
where we're located. I'm talking about Bradley and Drew and Ashley and Cleveland counties and some of the other surrounding areas just in our immediate part of the state. So it is a big part of our economy, has been for a long time, going through a lot of changes.
Yes.
But still very important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's, if we could, let's just talk briefly about the status of the timber industry and wood growing of trees and manufacturing and so forth in Southeast Arkansas right now. How do you see the current status of the business?
So the industry is really poised for a lot of growth, and by growth, it really starts with our forest inventory and our forest landowners. We have approximately 19 million acres of timberland across the state. In the southern part of the state, typically our counties are 90% forested or more. So the timber industry really does rule in the southern part of the state in terms of both land ownership and economic production. One of the interesting things that people often mention, and you and I have had this conversation much in the past, is that people are worried about, they see all the logging trucks on the road, they see some timber harvesting operations along the side of the road, and they think we're running out of trees. And what we've seen in the past 40 years in the state of Arkansas is we've gone from about 660 million tons of standing timber that's commercially marketable to almost 1.2 billion tons. So we've almost doubled the amount of timber that we have standing in Arkansas's forests. As a matter of fact, every year, in terms of our pine forests, we're growing net 11 million more tons than we're harvesting. So we're continuing to add wood. So as we do this, our forests are becoming older and denser, and so that offers two things. One, it's a real opportunity for economic growth as the industry can come here. Two of the negatives to that, we'd like to think about having so much timber as being nothing but good, but as a forester, I get concerned with two things. One is the prices that landowners are getting for their timber, because good prices and a good rate of return encourages forest management. And one of the issues is with such an oversupply, timber prices have been declining. They're less than half of what they were 15 years ago. And what we're also seeing is that there's so much growth out there relative to what's being harvested that landowners we really aren't expecting to see increases in prices, in the next 5 to 10 years. So that also leads to another problem, forest health. As our forests are getting older and more dense, there's a lot of pine plantations out there, for example, that need to be thinned. And if we come into a droughty year, or we get a bad fire year, or southern pine beetle, or we get some other climatic events, tornadoes, hurricanes coming out from the Gulf, we could potentially face some rather severe, forest damage. And so there's a lot of money that's standing out there in the woods right now, and like any living crop, there's the potential for risk and loss. So there's also that potential for huge growth, though, because we can bring industry and attract industry into the state and give them a stable supply of sustainable timber. And at the same time, that timber harvesting will help us improve our forest health. So that's one of my main work in terms of research and outreach at the University of Arkansas is to try and promote and educate both the industry and the public and policymakers about this opportunity for economic growth that's environmentally sustainable, also really environmentally beneficial.
Absolutely. Let me ask this. You mentioned pine plantations, and obviously pine gone to a lot of pine growth over the last many years in this part of the state. Do we have a lot of hardwood left?
Oh, actually, so when I speak of pine, because we want to talk about the southern part of the state, most of your readers would be interested in that. Although even in the southern part of the state, only a couple of things. Only 50% of our pine is actually planted pine. So we still have 50% natural pine, even in the southern part of the state. But if we look at hardwood resources, Arkansas actually 60% of our forest land across the state are hardwood forests, and 60% of that standing volume is actually hardwoods. Now, true, most of that is in the northern part of the state. Southern landowners have largely focused on pine, both natural and plantation pine, because the rotation lengths, we can grow a mature pine tree in 30 years or less, whereas with a hardwood tree it takes anywhere from 60 to 100 years. And so from an economic returns point of view, landowners find pine much more attractive. But even in our bottomland hardwoods, we're seeing an increase in the Delta, where we're storing a lot of bottomland hardwoods through public cost share programs. And landowners across the southern part of the state are doing less conversion of bottomland hardwoods into pine than they have been in the past, recognizing the importance both ecologically and economically of bottomland hardwood species. So we've still got a lot of hardwood out there.
Well, that's good to know, because you mentioned the fact about so many people are concerned that we're running out of timber. I mean, I hear that all the time. You and I have had those discussions. And then the second thing I hear is, well, there's not any hardwood left.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to address those issues, because we need to know the facts, what the facts are out there. And I appreciate you expounding on that. And the bottom line is, we've got timber to utilize.
Yes, practically coming out of our ears to the point where it's an economic opportunity, but also potentially a threat to forest health and to landowners. Statewide, if 10,000 acres burn or are blown down in a tornado, it's not going to damage our forest resources statewide, but to those landowners that lose all of their income or face a lot of cleanup issues, and we know we've had a lot of severe storms in the past year. We've seen, whether it's be straight line winds or hurricanes, flooding, some drought in the western part of the state. We know that when you've got a lot of standing money out there in the forest in terms of trees, it's at risk.
Do you know off the top of your head the percentage of our timberland that is owned by some of the larger companies or trust or so forth compared to private ownership?
I guess we have about 314,000 family forest landowners in the state, and they own about 10 million acres of that 19 million acres of forest land. So they are still our majority resource base.
So the large companies, as I would call them, and I'm talking about the Potlatch-Deltics and the GPs or International, or whoever we got out there
right.
now. I guess I'm going back to some of the old days with some of these names, but a lot of people think they own all the timber, and they don't.
No, they own actually about a third of the privately owned timber in the state.
Okay. Well, what type of timber manufacturers do you think we're the most likely to be able to try to recruit into this part of the state? Obviously, we've got hardwood flooring producers. We've got just building material producers. What's the thing that we need to be looking at, in especially South Arkansas, to try to bring new manufacturers in using timber products, or even encouraging our existing manufacturers to maybe get off into? Any thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So we're seeing some on a smaller scale, but definitely on the higher value end. We've seen an increase interest from the stave industry in our white oak resource. That's largely targeted at white oak, one particular species, but it can be a very high quality and high producing, where stumpage prices for landowners can be in the hundreds of dollars per ton, but it's usually just a smaller number of trees. And so we work with our foresters in the state, educating them about the opportunities for marketing that when there's, say, a larger land sale, and a lot of the separating out some of those stave quality white oak logs to maximize rates of return for the landowner. So we've seen that. On a larger scale, we're seeing an increase in interest in the wood pellet industry. Europe for a long time has been a very stable buyer, particularly Belgium and the United Kingdom, in buying American wood pellets from across the South. We have one major producer of industrial pellets, Highland, in Pine Bluff, and they are in the middle of about $140 million expansion project that's going to increase their production capacity. We're seeing some other interest around the state in terms of either other facilities for wood pellets. And one of the advantages is that we're probably going to be using some of that standing pine pulpwood. On the downside, because of the changes in the industry, for example, Crosset, the linerboard mill there going down and being closed, and they're also not using any Arkansas wood resources. They're actually importing. They've got supply commitments from other parts of the country, and so they're bringing wood in. And so a lot of that demand has gone down, so we've got a surplus of pine pulpwood. We're hoping that the pellet industry will work out. We're seeing a growth in Asian interest, particularly in Japan, from these markets. So we're hoping that that's going to be a growth industry and help our landowners move some of that pulpwood. On the lumber side, there's a really interesting development in engineered wood products, and that comes from cross-laminated timber. And we've heard a lot of interest about that. We have one operating manufacturer in the state right now in Magnolia, that's Texas CLT. They've really kind of flown under the radar a lot. We haven't heard a lot from them. They have largely been producing industrial mats for cranes and some bridge supports material, largely industrial use material. They were just rated last month to start constructing building rated material. And so we're seeing that interest. The University of Arkansas Fay Jones School of Design and Architecture and the School of Engineering in Fayetteville both have major wood using initiatives and research initiatives. Walmart's new corporate headquarters are going to be built out of cross-laminated timbers, and they have entered into an agreement with StructureLam to build a cross-laminated facility in Conway, which should be opening in the middle of this year, at least for initial testing runs. And so the advantage with cross-laminated timber is that we can use smaller pine trees, we can use some lower quality pine trees to make very large, I guess the best way to think of it is we call it super plywood. It can be anywhere from 10 inches to 20 inches thick and 40 feet by 60 feet, and it's like prefabricated building panels. But they're made out of they're made out of wood that's laminated at 90-degree angles, basically 2x6s that are glued at 90-degree angles, and they're pre-routed and drilled for all the door openings, all the plumbing and electrical, and so assembly time on building sites is greatly reduced. And we're also using a sustainable wood product that's sequestering carbon and providing jobs for Arkansas folks and the businesses, and we're building a more sustainable construction industry as well.
So I have to look at this from a simple standpoint, from a layman's terms, and I've been around the industry all my life, but still have a lot to learn. But we're basically talking about a product here that can be used to construct high-rise buildings.
Yes.
Instead of steel.
Yes, we're looking at 18 stories as approved by building codes in the United States now. And we're seeing some of those largely on the West Coast, a few on the East Coast. We haven't really seen penetration into the central United States yet, but there's a lot of growing interest, and of course the wood supply is here.
Well, that fascinates me that we could. It's got to be a tremendous market out there. Could be potentially for something when you can start building tall buildings, really out of lumber more so than out of other products. And now I want to ask this. One of the questions that comes up sometime when you talk to anybody about this. Well, what about fire codes and things like that? Explain that.
Right. We had the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville actually, and the Fay Jones School has done some pioneering work because they've recently built a dormitory hall, a residence hall, the Adohi residence halls there. And there was a lot of concern initially when the School of Architecture brought this idea to the folks at Fayetteville. And they had long conversations with the fire marshal on campus and then also the county fire marshal. The issue with these pieces of wood is they're very thick. As I mentioned, 10 inches to as much as 24 inches thick from laminated wood. And wood is an excellent insulator. And so what happens in a fire with these wood structures is that the outside gets charred and basically builds up an insulating layer of charcoal, and it's extremely difficult to get these beams to burn all the way through. And so the way I like to liken it, to put it very simply, if you ever throw a big log onto a campfire, it'll never burn all the way through. You've got to keep turning it and exposing, unburned wood to the fire to get it to burn all the way through. Well, the same way in a building, especially with modern fire suppression systems, these buildings aren't going to collapse. The earthing structural steel at about 450 degrees loses about half of its strength and they collapse. Wood won't do that. Wood will actually maintain its structural integrity. So we can build wood buildings that are safer in a fire. They're rated the same way that concrete and steel buildings, the Adohi residence halls, can take a direct hit from an EF2 tornado. We have had some concerns from building designers and architects about what happens with this wood when it gets, if we get flooding. Mm-hmm. And most of these buildings are built with what's called a pedestal arrangement, and we have a concrete steel first floor.
Gotcha.
And then it's wood above that. And so we're somewhat insulated from flooding effects. And my guess is if we were looking at areas where we'd see more than one floor of flooding, we'd build the pedestal 2 stories out of concrete and work above that in wood.
Gotcha. Well, this is just fascinating to me and exciting as well, because I can see kind of a whole new generation of construction and using wood, renewable resources, and something that could certainly benefit the economy, especially in our part of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a big lumber industry. We are the 9th leading producer of lumber in the country in terms of, and we also rank in the top 10 in terms of total wood produced in the state. That also gives you another idea how important this is to the state of Arkansas. But we're also, by making these laminated building panels, we're doing a lot of value added work here in the state. And then we've got the potential markets of Dallas, Fort Worth, St. Louis, Memphis, even reaching into Denver, Colorado. So when we think about the existing CLT plants, they're largely on the West Coast, and so transporting it over the mountains and into the central United States is very difficult. So we've got an opportunity, particularly in the Gulf coastal region, to be a big player and see a real expansion in this industry. A lot of demand.
And that would benefit us in many ways.
Absolutely. And architects and builders and the general public are interested in having greener buildings. When we think about carbon dioxide emissions, about 60% of our nation's carbon dioxide emissions are tied to management and operations of buildings, heating and cooling them. Right. Well, we've got a way with wood to actually sequester a large amount of that carbon in the construction. And so we can actually make greener buildings when we structure them with wood.
Well, I could sit here and talk to you all day about that. I just find that interesting, and we're going to try to keep a watch on that, and hope that as you continue to work on those kind of projects with the college here, that every once in a while keep us informed as what's going on. We'd like to keep the public informed. And let me ask you this: is there going to be a need, like in Arkansas? Building codes, are they going to need to be altered in a lot of places to take advantage of this type of product?
So we have some national building codes that allow us to build these 18-story tall buildings. But what it's going to take is probably some outreach and education work with building inspectors and local code enforcement folks, so that they feel comfortable, as well as even the local fire marshals. They're going to need to see building, particularly if we're talking about schools or hospitals, public safety is still primary interest, and we don't want to put out a product, and we aren't, that's going to be dangerous to the public Absolutely. Or to the residents in these buildings. So we're going to need to do some educational work, and of course that's why it's so important that we get some of these buildings constructed. We get experience with them. It's just a process of changing. We're really going to revolutionize the construction industry in the state and outside of the state with this new wood technology. It's not old wood technology, it's 21st engineered wood technology.
Right.
And that makes a big difference.
Well, I know how important the timber industry is. I focus obviously on Southeast Arkansas, but I know statewide and even in a lot of the country. And, I say to people that I talk to around the country, they often will ask, how do your people make a living, where you come from? And I say, well, it's really the timber industry for the most part, because it is such a major part of our economy.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think people don't realize is the importance in terms of the quality of the jobs that the timber industry produces. The average income, for example, in Bradley County, if you work in the timber industry, total compensation is about $56,000 a year. So that would be wages plus the benefits that they receive in the timber industry. But that is much higher than the county average. As a matter of fact, across the state, the timber industry produces better jobs than the statewide average. And so these are important jobs, especially in rural areas, because the economic benefits from folks that are making $50,000-$60,000 a year means that they're buying bigger homes, they're spending more in the local economy, they have benefits, so they're supporting doctors, nurses, dentists. So there's a lot of people in the medical profession, restaurants. It works all the way through the economy to have some of these premier jobs, and we've got the ability, I think, to start working on both domestic and international exports to really grow this industry. We've got the wood, we've got the expertise in terms of the community, and we also, I think, in general, the public in South Arkansas understands the renewable nature of this resource. They've seen trees cut, they've seen that their fathers or grandfathers cut, and they've seen 2 or 3 rotations of trees that have been planted and grown up again and cut and grown again. So we have a public that's a little bit more knowledgeable in general, I think, about forestry and open and receptive. And we generally have a very cooperative with our environmental organizations and our forest industry, that we tend to work cooperatively to find solutions to problems rather than arguing with each other. So Arkansas, I think, is a great place to see growth. It's one of the reasons why, having been here 20 years, I'm still excited about the future and come to work every day excited.
Well, you've got me excited sitting here listening to all of it. And to kind of wrap it up, and there's several aspects of the timber industry. You've got the landowners, the loggers, the people that go out there and harvest it, as well as the manufacturers.
Right, and they're all three are really vital, Greg. We haven't mentioned really a lot about the logging workforce itself, and of course during the coronavirus they've been taking extra precautions, and they've had issues in terms of workforce productivity. But we've got a shortage of loggers. The average age of our loggers is well over 55 years. And so recruiting, and this isn't the business that a lot of people think it is. You're not out there with a chainsaw or an axe. They're working in multi-million-dollar computer-driven, air-conditioned equipment. Our logging workforce is very highly educated and trained in environmental protections, and it's a growth industry. We can't grow either. We can't help our landowners or our wood products industry if we don't have the logging workforce. We've got a great nucleus, but we really need to be doing workforce development and education and training. You can't just take a high school graduate out of the woods, even if they're mechanically adept, and drop them right into a $1.5 million harvesting machine. It's not quite that easy. It's pretty sophisticated equipment.
Well, education's more important than ever.
Yes, education, both in turn and trying to get our young people to realize that this is a renewable industry, working from forest, whether you're assisting forest landowners as a forester, whether you're working as a logger, or whether you're in a wood processing facility. These are some of there's some really great jobs. Not only are we providing things that people need, but clean air, clean water, biodiversity, a greener planet. So I get very excited. I get excited as a professor for our students, because this is an industry that's going to be vital into the 21st century in terms of a healthy economy and healthy communities.
That's terrific. We're obviously very happy to have the college here, the forestry school here, as I still call it, the forestry school. I know it's a lot involved in that, but things going pretty well here with the college and with the forestry school?
Yes, absolutely. We're seeing some increases in enrollment. We're in the process of actually hiring a new dean. Our dean of about 11 years, Dr. Philip Toppy, retired this past year, but we've got a lot of good candidates. We're very excited about the search. And continuing on with our strong support of the forest products industry, we have expanded a little bit in terms of we've taken on the School of Agriculture at UAM, and so we're serving the agricultural community now in Southeast Arkansas especially, but also we're looking at a very broad natural resource and ecosystem-based approach towards sustaining our forest and agricultural resources in the state. So it's a very exciting time. We've got some new highly energetic faculty online that keep me on my toes as well. It's fun for me to see a new generation of professors, and then continuously we're producing a lot of really high quality graduates to help the landowners out there get solutions to the problems that they're facing.
Very good. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for spending time with us. Is there anything else you can think of that you think just might be of interest to our listeners?
Well, we're going to see an increase in environmental markets, I think. We're going to see carbon sequestration for private landowners. So we're going to be able to sell, as landowners practice good forest management. I think we're also going to see some private initiatives. Corporate America is really interested in greening up their products. And one of the things they're doing is buying carbon credits. In other words, landowners that are growing trees, there's carbon stored in those trees, and there's people willing to pay them to help grow more trees. And so with that, we've got an additional revenue stream. It might not be really large, but $10 to $15 an acre per year of extra revenue in the pockets of our landowners can make a big difference. Absolutely. Pays the property taxes. That's not a small thing.
Yes.
So we're seeing some of those environmental markets expand as well. And as an economist, that's also something I'm very excited about. Forest landowners have for years been producing wildlife, clean air, clean water. And we've all said thank you to them for it, but there's never been a method to economically compensate them, and we're starting to see that happen. And I think that's a good thing, because when they get economically compensated, they'll do even more of it.
Absolutely. Well, again, we appreciate this. It's just fascinating to me, and I think our viewers will find it interesting and educational, and that's what we're trying to do. We have something here.
We
have something here in Southeast Arkansas to utilize, to build on, and to grow with.
Yes.
And benefit the whole country and the whole world, as well as ourselves here.
Yes, to keep Arkansas the natural state, to keep it green, but also to have a lot of good jobs and opportunities for people. And I always say that forests and people go well together. And I don't think there's any place better than South Arkansas that we can demonstrate that.
Well, we're with you all the way, and please keep us informed. We want to keep our people informed and appreciate all the work that's going on here.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'll be happy to do that.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.